Hi everyone, tonight we're going to talk about inequalities and how to graph them. Before we graph them, let's make sure that we know what an inequality is. So an inequality is basically the relationship between two numbers that are not equal. So if they're not equal, then one number would be greater than the other. Or we could say that one number is less than the other. We could say it is greater than or equal to. Or we could say that it is less than or equal to. So big thing to remember is that the larger number is always on the open side of the symbol, okay? The larger number is always on the open side of the symbol, okay? So for instance, if we want to compare 8 and 9, then we would say that 8 is less than 9, okay? So we read from left to right, 8 is less than 9. Or we could say 9 is greater than 8, so we would use the symbol greater than. Notice that 9, because it is a larger number, is always on the open side of the symbol, okay? Whereas 8, being smaller, is always on the pointy side of the symbol. So now let's try an example. We have x, some value of x, is greater than 8. Okay, so that would mean that on our number line, if we go ahead and finish numbering these, let's say we had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and we can keep going, okay? Now, we're saying that all values of x must be greater than 8, okay? They have to be greater than 8. They cannot be equal to 8, okay? So that means that 9 is a possible value, okay? Because it is greater than 8. 10 is also a possible value, as is 11, 12, 13, and every value in between here, okay? So that means 12 and a half is a possibility, 11 and a half, 10 and a quarter. All of these numbers are possible values. Keep in mind also that 8 and a half is a possibility, okay? As is 8 and a quarter, and anything down all the way up until 8. But 8 is not a possible value because it says it must be greater than, it cannot be equal to. So instead of putting a dot at 8, I'm going to put a circle, an open circle, which excludes the value of 8 from possibilities, okay? But my number line will go all the way down to that circle. And I'm going to make sure that I have a nice bold line. In some cases, you may decide to show your graph above the number line. If it's easier, you could do this instead, okay? That is also a perfectly valid graph. Okay, so now we have an example where we're looking for all possible values of x, where x has to be less than or equal to 5. So I'm going to make a little bit larger number line here. All right, and we're saying x is less than or equal to 5. So that means that 2 is a possibility, 3, all of these numbers in here are possibilities, okay? So I'm going to color in everything that is below 5. And now the question becomes, do we include 5 or not as part of our graph? Well, it says x is less than or equal to, so x could possibly be 5. So I'm going to put a closed circle at 5, and I'm going to color in everything that is below it. So important things to make note of here, okay, is that if you see a less than or equal to symbol or a greater than or equal to symbol, use a closed circle, okay? If you see a less than symbol or a greater than symbol, then you want to use an open circle. All right, now we're going to consider a little bit trickier example. We have x being greater than or equal to 1 and x being less than 4. So we've got multiple values going on here where we have got multiple rules for x. So let's make sure that our number line includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So we have x being greater than or equal to 1. Okay, if I read from right to left, in other words, 1 is less than or equal to x. Okay, so x has to be more than or equal to 1. Note that that is a less than or equal to symbol, so I'm going to put a closed circle here. And I know that I'm including all values above 1 up until we hit 4, okay? And at that point, we know that x has to be less than 4 and cannot be equal to 4. So that's going to be an open circle. And now I know that I can color in everything in between. So something to make note of before we go on to the next question is that an example like this where you have x following two different rules, it is both greater than or equal to 1 and it is less than 4. Then in this case, we need to keep in mind that this is an and situation, right? We have two different rules for x where x is sort of in between these two different numbers. Now, on the other hand, we could have an or situation where we have two different rules for x. X could be less than 0, or it could be greater than 2, okay? In other words, we're saying it cannot be between 0 and 2. It has to be below 0, or it has to be greater than 2. So I'm going to make that number line. All right, now, if we say that x is less than 0, then that means we need an open circle at 0, and we want to shade in everything that is below it. Or it could be greater than 2. So again, an open circle at 2, and I'm going to shade in everything above it. So with an or example like this, inequalities that have two rules where you have it's this or this, then you're generally going to have your graph is going to go in two opposite directions, okay? Similar to what we have here. And for an and inequality, the graph will be somewhere kind of in the middle of the number line like we had with number 5. Okay, and if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and pause the video and try graphing the rest of the numbers between 3 and 10 on your own. Alright, and the last thing I want to do tonight is go over a couple of examples where you're given a graph and we now have to figure out what the values of x could possibly be, or whatever our variable is that we choose to use. I'm going to use x simply because it's easy and it's common. So in this first example, number 11, all of our x values are above 0, okay? Now, it's important to make note of the type of circle that we have, okay? This is a filled-in circle, which means that x is greater than or equal to 0. With number 12, we have an or inequality, okay? So x is less than or equal to 7, or x is greater than or equal to 9. Okay. Number 13 is a little bit tricky. We've got x kind of in the middle here, right? All of our values of x fall kind of in here. And we know that it cannot be larger than 4, but it could possibly be equal to 4. So x is less than or equal to 4. It is also greater than or equal to 2. So our values have to be somewhere between 2 and 4. And our last one, all the x values have to be below 8, okay? And it cannot be equal to 8 because that circle is open. So x is less than 8. All right, now I'd like you to try the remaining questions on your own and check your work when you are finished.